Hi and welcome to Chem 330. My name is Laura and I'm a former 330 student. Today I'll be taking on a tour of the facilities as well as talking to you a little bit about the importance of lab safety. As a former 330 student, let me reassure you that labs are a lot more fun than they are stressful. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. You'll find your lab classroom on the second floor of beautiful McMillan Hall in rooms 201, 205, or 209. Shortly before the first day of lab, room assignments will be posted here on the wall across from 205. Welcome to your chemistry career's new home. Come on in! Each teaching lab has a central classroom area with individual workstations on either side. The classroom area will be your home base. At the start of each lab session, you'll meet here to hand in assignments, take a quiz, and discuss details of the day's experiment. Most students leave their bags and jackets here before moving to their workstation. If you have any food or beverages with you, please leave them in your backpack or out in the hallway. Food will contaminate your experiments, and experiments will contaminate your food. While chemistry and cooking have a lot in common, the lab isn't a dining hall. Speaking of safety, what happens if there's an emergency in the lab? Most importantly, always call your TA for help. Showers and eye wash stations are located on the side of the room, just behind the classroom area, and are for emergency use only because when turned on, it will flood the classroom and do a lot of damage. There's a fire blanket in the back of the lab, as well as a first aid kit in the back side. Fire extinguishers are at the back and front of the lab. Remember to call your TA over in the event of any accident or emergency, be it a fire, chemical spill, or injury. In the event of a fire, make sure to push the emergency stop button when exiting the room, which turns off all outlets and active hot plates. The last thing anyone needs is chemicals getting on their hair, clothes, skin, or eyes. Luckily, you can do your part by dressing appropriately in the lab. This means long pants, t-shirts, and closed-toe and back shoes. Also, long hair should always be pulled back. You must be wearing your lab apron and goggles whenever you are at your workstation. Remember, 4 hours without a stylish outfit is a small price to pay for your safety. Now that we've gotten safety out of the way, let's return to the workstation. On your first and last day in the lab, you'll be asked to take inventory of your workstation. Your personal set of tools and glassware can be found in the cabinets under your work surface. When taking inventory, lay out all the supplies. With these simple tools, you have the power to make fascinating scientific discoveries. Be careful, the shelves are not fixed. Sometimes you might find that the specific tool you need is missing. When I was a Chem 330 student, I sometimes borrowed my missing supplies from vacant workstations only to find them missing again. Instead, I recommend just going to the stockroom across the hall for any missing equipment. Next to your cabinet, you should find your storage locker. Here, you should store personal items such as goggles, aprons, and markers, but no glassware. Remember not to put your papers or computer in the fume hood. Instead, do all writing on this platform that conveniently slides out of your workstation. In the back of your fume hood, you'll see a series of cone-shaped knobs. This is the gas line used for Experiment 1. Make sure everything is hooked up before turning it on. Cleanup is an essential part of each lab period, always at the end and sometimes even the beginning. Whenever you finish your data collection for the day, make sure to thoroughly clean and organize your workstation so that it's just as nice as when you arrived. If not for yourself, do it for the person using the workstation after you. Glassware can be washed using the sink and soap dispenser at the end of each fume hood grouping. Deionized water should be used only as the lab manual dictates to adhere to green chemistry. The DI bottles can be refilled at the sink. While cleanup is easily the least exciting part of lab work, it's essential to your success as a scientist. There are several different waste containers, each with a specific purpose. Plastic transfer pipettes and automatic pipette tips go in the black medical waste container. Broken glass and other sharp glass waste goes in the red sharps container. Reagents go in the waste container in the fume hood in the back of the lab. Only paper goods and pH paper should go in the regular trash. Remember that your TAs are here to help you, so don't be afraid to ask questions. They were once in your shoes, and they know that labs can sometimes be confusing or stressful. I once came to lab distressed because I realized I had forgotten my lab notebook. Because the lab was not supposed to be too long that day, my TA let me run back to my room to grab it after the quiz. While they are in a position of some power and are in charge of grading you, they do realize that you're only human. In return for the help and respect that they give you, please at least try to come to lab on time, properly dressed, and with the necessary work turned in. This is something that will allow lab to run more smoothly and positively affect your grade. Now, before we send you off, some students who have successfully completed 330, as well as myself, would like to offer you some advice.
One of the things that I value about labs is the lasting relationships that I formed with other students. I'd say make the most of the small-sized lab sections and really get to know your lab partner and students from nearby workstations. You can ask each other questions, compare results. Labs give you the opportunity to really get to know and learn from your peers, so my advice is to take advantage of that.
My advice would be to not be afraid of your lab TA. Your lab TA is there to answer questions during the lab and double check your setup to make sure you're not making mistakes. And they can also explain steps and explain why you're doing something a certain way. But even after the lab, they can be helpful to answer questions on the lab report or help explain data that you're confused about. So if you're stuck and you can't figure something out by yourself, don't be afraid to go to your lab TA to ask for help.
I know lab can be a little intimidating at first, but I promise after a lab or two under your belt, you'll feel much more comfortable in the lab environment. And if you're confused about literally anything, just ask another student or TA. I promise there's always going to be someone in the room who knows the answer, and there's no reason for you to be confused or lost about anything.
When I was in Chem 330, I found that while the lectures can sometimes feel a little bit rigid, the lab is a place where everyone can really work with their hands, ask broad conceptual questions, and make mistakes. So even if you screw up your procedure or if your experiment gets a low yield, I assure you there will always be something really valuable for you to learn.
It was really nerve-wracking coming to my first few labs. Just remember that as long as you did the pre-lab prep, you should be able to succeed, and don't be afraid to ask a peer or TA if you ever have any questions.